Thank you for joining us for this episode of Politically Basic. My guest today is phenomenal, someone I've known for many years, a powerhouse actually in the political world, Paul Fitzpatrick. He is the president of the 1792 Exchange, which protects faith-based and conservative institutions and philanthropy, and helps corporations move back toward neutral to protect free exercise, free speech, and free enterprise. We love that. Paul was previously Deputy Chief of Staff for U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler of Georgia, and was Chief of Staff for Congressman Mark Meadows of North Carolina also. And before working in government, Paul served for 2 decades with Family Research Council. So welcome, Paul. I'm so glad that you are with me today on Politically Basic, and thank you for being here.
Kyle, it's my honor to join you.
I've known you for a very long time, like more than 2 decades, actually.
Yes,
So
we are maybe a year away from 3 decades.
Oh my gosh, that's really exciting. Well, it's been an honor to know you all these years, and you've had quite the both private sector and not experience in your professional life. I mean, you've really done some incredible things. So why don't you tell our listeners today kind of what your experience has been and a little bit about the 1792 Exchange, where you are leading as president now.
Sure, absolutely. Just to add some color, I started it at Xerox Corporation.
I love that.
Right out of college. And interestingly, at that time, in the early 90s, corporations were seen as really friends of free market. And frankly, we're seen more as friends of Republicans than Democrats, policy-wise. But what I saw is some training coming in through the Human Resources Department. It was actually diversity training that had some quite concerning implications for people of faith or people of traditional viewpoints.
Wow, even back then?
Even back then, yes. That was, I think, in 1992.
Okay.
So then I went to work, as you said, at Family Research Council. So this is in the policy space. And the idea is we were defending religious liberty, human life, marriage, and family. These bedrocks that helped build our civilization. I mean, the success of our nation.
Right.
And so I saw during that time how corporations started engaging and speaking into issues that had nothing to do with the business.
Right.
So then I moved on, and I was working on Capitol Hill, and working in Congress is an amazing opportunity, and just the history and seeing the mix and the energy of school groups and people taking tours for the first time, whether they're old or young, and the lobbyists and obviously the legislators and the staff, lots of energy. But I also saw when I was there, corporations coming in and having a good relationship with a member of Congress, but then all of a sudden bringing up an issue that had nothing to do with their business, but it was a divisive issue. And so they actually harmed their agenda and their mission on their core issues because they were bringing in divisive, often social issues. And I saw that. So then I was working for a member who lost an election, and that's one of the downsides of being in Washington, working on Capitol Hill.
Absolutely. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you're looking for another job.
Exactly. So there I was. And so I was approached to help start 1792 Exchange. And the interesting thing is, getting back to what I had seen corporations move from being neutral to all of a sudden, in essence, putting their finger on the scales one way, really for left-leaning policies. And so I was approached to help start an organization called 1792 Exchange. And we're defending, as you said, small businesses, and we're equipping them, and nonprofits. These are conservative ones. And how are we doing that? We're engaging woke corporations, helping them to move them back towards neutral. And the idea is to get them to focus on producing good products and services, not divisive political agendas. And so the idea is to help build this organization. That's what we've done. And we're very, very thankful. We've got some databases and products that are really intended to equip people who are running small businesses. And what does that mean? Or running a nonprofit? Well, if you're running a business, you need to have a bank. You need to have a place to host your website, right? You need to have a place to take credit card donations or payments. Well, imagine what would happen. And we saw it happen in 2020 when corporations and nonprofits were canceled or debanked, or people were assets divested from them, or people actually lost their jobs because they were on the wrong side of a political issue. And so the idea behind our database, and part of our core mission, is so that people running businesses, people running nonprofits can look on there and say, well, with whom should I bank? With whom should I in essence, what we call our financial and operational supply chain. How do we make it work? It's not intended necessarily, which coffee should I buy?
Sure.
We do know people are using it as part of their screen for financial investments, saying I do or don't want to invest in these kind of companies. We don't give investment advice, but those are some of the things we do. But we're also engaging. The idea is engaging with companies. Public companies are under enormous pressure. Most of the folks running these businesses, they don't want to be engaged in basically political fights.
Sure.
They just want to produce good products and services.
They want to run their business and put food on the table at home and live their lives and have the freedom to make those choices should they choose to do so. I think that's a big question that I have in all of this, and I think that the average American person has too. That was so helpful to hear more about why 1792 Exchange was started and why 1792.
Oh, well, that was the year the first stock exchange was founded in the U.S. And it was founded because there wasn't a free exchange of information. There was cheating. There was mistrust. And shareholders are being cheated, much like today. We've got a breakdown of trust. And so that's really what we're about.
I love that. And I love how quickly that came along in our country's history, too, that need was filled so quickly. But this is still a really important conversation to break down. And what we do here at Politically Basic is just really break down these concepts and issues. And while you guys are not necessarily political, what you are doing is protecting corporations, protecting shareholders, businesses, and consumers, too. Because we should have that choice. We should have that choice when it comes to supporting policies, supporting political candidates, supporting anything that affects that realm, and not be dictated to in that way. And so I love looking at your work as very protective of a lot of the values of our American culture, our laws, and our nation. And so we're kind of entering into, it's so interesting to hear that this has been around for a while, because, you know, we have sort of come into this new era of especially really large corporations kind of saying, hey, you know what? We at the top believe a certain way, and we're going to support that, fund that, try to influence that. And you have a lot of shareholders or people who have a vested interest personally and financially in those decisions or that influence or where that money is going, saying, wait a minute, we are supposed to have a say, right? We're supposed to be able to say, we don't like this being supported, or you guys divesting over here or putting our money there. But also, I just don't think a lot of people understand what's happening. And so we now have this ESG movement. And I kind of want to jump right into having you explain what ESG is and what's going on there.
Absolutely. Yeah, a great lead in. This all has been building for decades, as I said, but it emerged with the bow on top, just delivered with ESG. It stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance Principles. Came out of the UN, an agenda ultimately, as they said, to push globalist agendas and basically leverage corporations' influence. Now, that's not a public statement. That's behind the scenes, but we now know. So what does that mean? It was initially pitched as corporations need to come alongside these agendas, including and especially on the climate agenda, to say we've got to make sure, and some believe you need to make sure the globe doesn't warm more than 1.5 degrees, right? Because of what humans are doing. Well, that became a rallying cry. And so Wall Street, ultimately ESG, is a marriage of Wall Street's desire to make money and the progressive secular left's desire to push agendas and policies that they can't get enacted through laws or through courts. And so what does that mean in practical terms? So ultimately, if I want to put my money, my retirement money, in a fund, a mutual fund that is an ESG fund, which would mean there's a manager who's making decisions saying, I don't want to be in fossil fuel. I don't want to be invested in a company that doesn't embrace the social agenda I believe in. If I'm making that decision, that's up to me. I'm willing to take lower returns, which I'm going to get. In the long term, I'm going to get lower returns, but I'm willing to do that. And if I am, it's my money. The problem and what has happened is Wall Street and these major Wall Street firms that control trillions of dollars. Some of your listeners maybe have heard the term, the name of a company, BlackRock, biggest asset management firm in the world. They realized, wait, we can make a lot more money offering these ESG funds. And so lots and lots of money moved into it. But they didn't just use those ESG principles, again, environmental, social, and governance principles. They actually started overlaying it on other investments, even though the asset owners, me, let's say my 401k, I wasn't asking to use my money for political or ideological agendas, yet they were doing it. You say, well, how could they do that? Well, really in two ways. That big asset owner, so they've got enormous influence. And the big three asset managers, we won't get into all the details, they're called BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. They're the largest shareholders of most big companies.
Right.
So especially if they work together, if they came in and said, Kyle, you're CEO of this company, they'll privately meet with you. And Larry Fink would do that and say, Kyle, we really want you to push this environmental agenda. We want you to get on board and trumpet the issue, the fact that we've got to get out of fossil fuels and we need to get into renewables, or we need to push this social agenda. And so there's a lot of pressure on you because you're a public company CEO. And you know when Larry Fink comes in, he could replace your board and then you can get fired. So that's one lever.
Right.
That's called engagement. They call it engagement.
Okay.
The second is, well, what's his influence? Well, they are investing pools of money, call them exchange traded funds, mutual funds, et cetera. We won't get into all the details, and I'm not an expert on that. But the point is, they not only have the influence I just told you about, they actually can vote the shares. Historically, they didn't do it. And what do you mean vote? What does that mean, vote a share?
I want you to explain this because this is the part where I think that your average person has been pushed to the side of what has been happening, what decision-making power or voice they have in this is, were they ever told that this is happening? And then what do they know when it comes to their vote and the power that they have in that one shareholder vote? We all get those mailings. You know what I'm talking about. I think there have been lawsuits over these little packets that come folded in half, and it's like 4 font typeface, and everyone throws them away.
That's right.
But that is like your little guide to them telling you, hey, you're invested through whatever, your 401k or whatever, in BlackRock, and this is what they're planning to do. And if we don't hear from you, maybe we're going to just go ahead and take your vote, or other things are happening. And I just think it's interesting, and I want to hear from you on this, but as someone who is not in the financial realm and I'm just try to talk to really smart people like you and keep up on this. I don't read those. I don't keep up on what my responsibility as a shareholder is in all of these companies that I have shares in. So what's going on there?
Yeah, so the bottom line 101, you're a shareholder like you described. You own a share in a public company. Well, that gives you a vote, right? You get one vote and one share. So at the shareholder meeting once a year, there are decisions made because you're an owner. It's not just the CEO and the executives. There's a board and then there's shareholders. And it may be the normal types of resolutions would be, we think the CEO should be paid less, or we think the investment strategy of the company, they won't get into details, but broadly we're affirming the fact that we're going into this market.
Sure.
Broad things. And it also could be about major issues of governance, making sure there's good stewardship and all that. But what has happened is activists have basically done what's called introduced shareholder resolutions, generally from the left. There are a few from the right, but generally from the left, to push things like diversity audits or asking major companies to spend lots of money to do research on, well, what's the impact of pro-life laws on your business? Right. These things have nothing to do with the business. They're not going to help. But the thing is, you're a shareholder. You can vote for or against those. To your point, most people don't vote.
Right.
We don't understand it. We're too busy. I'm in this business. I'm not paying attention to my votes either. So what happens is, back to what we were saying, that influence, your vote, just like your vote in the political realm and the civil realm, the asset managers we're talking about were actually voting. So they were voting to put pressure on companies. One of the things they do is they vote out board members. So famously at ExxonMobil, there were this great story, a fund out of California, which had a very small percent of ExxonMobil. They pushed 3 board members, and ultimately they won. They got 2 people on the board because they had the big asset managers that were voting our shares, supported it. 2 people who are skeptical of the fossil fuel industry are on the board of ExxonMobil. So that is shocking.
It is shocking.
And what does it do? That is harming the shareholders.
Absolutely.
And it's what is happening.
Well, it's a gigantic ripple effect in such a teeny tiny start, right? It's a tiny little domino that ends up having a big effect.
Exactly.
And then and if you don't utilize your right to vote as a shareholder, what happens to it?
It's gone. They're voting it.
They're voting.
Yes, yes.
They take it, right?
Yeah. The issue is that they've got the authority.
Yeah.
And even if here's the tricky part, the problem, even if you do vote, and this is a strong point I need to make, even if you are voting your shares, they still have your money. So when Larry Fink shows up at a company, even though Kyle is voting her shares, Larry Fink is still saying to the CEO, I still own 7% of your company.
Yeah.
If I get together with my friends, I could replace the board, I can get you fired. It's that influence because of the assets.
Right.
And yes, the vote makes a difference, but they really respect, and the power is in the assets. So that's why principled people who don't, frankly, if you don't want to have activist asset managers using ESG principles, whatever they call them, because they're going to change the name. We can talk about that. If you don't want them leveraging your money to push agendas, then what you need to do is, frankly, you need to take your money out of those asset managers and put them into neutral asset managers.
And how is a regular person supposed to navigate finding that? Because they don't have like an ESG seal on the website. Maybe they do, and I don't know. How do you know?
Some do.
Okay.
I mean, well, honestly,
I'm sure some are very, very proud of the issues that they are supporting and things that they're really wanting to highlight and put shareholder money into. So how does an average person go about figuring out what asset managers or these gigantic companies they align with? Like, how do you make that decision?
Well, so there's a lot there. What do you do if you work for a company that offers a 401k plan? That's a retirement plan. Lots of Americans are in those. Your company is what's called the plan administrator. You go and you ask them, and they're the sponsor, and then there's an administrator, and you just ask your HR department, I want to get more details about it. I want to see the list of who are the asset managers, what are the funds, and everybody, we all should be making conscious decisions of how we're investing.
Absolutely.
And even if you're just getting free advice, how are you doing that? Which means you're going to be picking funds. In most 401k plans, you can pick and choose funds. And the tricky part, what you're getting at is, well, the average person doesn't know is BlackRock or Morgan Stanley or which one, PIMCO or Franklin Templeton, who is pushing which agenda. Well, you could go to our database. You can go to 1792exchange.com. We've got multiple databases there. I mentioned the first one about protecting your company, and you can learn about companies ultimately. Are they pushing ideological agendas or not? But we also have a database. It's intended for people in the policy space in the states having to do with state pension funds, which we can talk about more. Those are important funds that are being used to push agendas. Well, but on that database, you can look and see. We rank all the big asset managers.
So helpful.
The biggest 130. And you may say, how do you rank them? Well, the point is, we say, what is the percentage of vote for ESG shareholder resolutions? Remember those environmental, social, and governance. And so if they're voting for them, very, very high percentage, you know what? I should get my money out of there and go to ones that are lower. Now, here's the tricky thing. Because over the last 3 years, there's been a significant pushback on these asset managers. It's come from state treasurers, state attorneys general, state legislators, and organizations, and frankly, like ourselves, pointing out that when when an asset manager says, I'm going to invest your money only for financial returns, but then they make decisions for non-financial reasons, they're really in legal jeopardy. And that's been pointed out. So because of that, a lot of the big asset managers, they're not using the term ESG as much. And they're also saying, no, we're not voting as much for those ESG resolutions. And actually, that's a positive trend. So we want to praise them. Over the last 3 years, their support and vote for the ESG resolutions has gone dramatically down, including the big ones I talked about, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. The problem is that, let's say they're voting for, like BlackRock last year, I think it was 7%, 6 or 7% for ESG shareholder resolutions.
Interesting.
That's still hundreds of shareholder resolutions.
It sounds really small.
Yes.
It doesn't sound like much.
No.
So what do you see and you think like, oh boy, maybe if I don't align with this and this isn't what I want to support, and you see 7%, somebody might look at that and say like, oh, well, that's pretty low.
And it is.
Yeah.
And that, because some of them are in the 60s.
Okay.
I mean, really, really high.
Yeah.
But the average is you're probably in the 20s. And so, yes, that's a good sign.
Okay.
But you also want to read, and that's the hard part. There's not an easy place to go read. There's really not a simple answer or solution. Maybe that's something we need to develop.
Right.
Because you need to say, okay, within back to your example, your 401k, I've got to pick between these 2 or 3 funds. They're going to have similar products. I want a mid-cap and a large cap index fund. I'm just using examples. There may be multiple options. Well, you could just go out, look at the companies, look at BlackRock's website, compare it to Dimensional Fund's website, look at their voting, but also just kind of read about it. Because the tricky part is Larry Fink and BlackRock are still pushing these agendas. And so even though the voting is better, so you want to be as informed as you can, but we understand there's not an easy way to do it.
Well, I would love for you to develop that because I think that when I have these conversations, and I read Woke Inc. and I've tried to educate myself, this is a little bit trickier of a subject for someone whose brain does not work like yours does, and that's my struggle. Is I don't understand this, but I have assets under management. I have a portfolio. It's teeny tiny, but I got one. And for those of us who want to be able to do a better job of navigating this, or not just rely on someone else who's, bigger and more capable to come in and say like, don't worry, we've got you taken care of. We want to have some personal authority in where this is going, because it does have an important social effect and economic effect. Like this matters. And I think that transparency is what we're seeking. We want to know what's going on, and we also want to be able to understand it better. So any way that anyone can help, the average Kyle Campbell over here just trying to figure out where to put my funds that I've worked hard for, and I don't want it going to support something I don't want it to support. Maybe I do and I want to go in that direction, but just being able to kind of like traverse this territory is really tough. And so I'm so appreciative for organizations like yours, like 1792 Exchange, to provide resources, because at the end of the day, and I think that this is what we always come back to, right? We live in America. Thank the good Lord, right? We're free. We have the ability to make choices. And I think that is the thing that's frustrating, is when big, bad, powerful, influential, either corporations or asset managers or people come in and they want to take our choice away. Just let us choose. This is our personal freedom, our personal rights, our authority as American citizens to make these choices for ourselves. And those are kind of going away. And so that's what we're seeking. And when we can get that, freedom restored a little bit, I think that's always, should be our goal.
Oh, absolutely. And the problem with, and what we're talking about in many ways is this intersection of big business and big government. And what big business and big government don't want is competition. And that's your point. They don't really want us to have a lot of choices. And so to the extent we can engage with policymakers, we need to do that. To the extent we can engage with companies through voting, through speaking out, through writing letters and saying, I like your coffee, but I don't like you pushing your politics, whatever it may be. Unless the American people speak up, we're going to have a hard time. But I would say one of the ways that we can really motivate people within these companies, and to be clear, when you look at big public companies, we're talking about public companies mostly.
Sure.
Because frankly, if someone owns a privately held company and they want to politicize it, it's up to them.
Yeah.
They're probably harming their profits, but that's their business. But when it comes to a public company that's owned by the public, by definition, bad decisions that, what we like to say, divide employees, alienate customers, they harm shareholders. Well, within those companies, there are lots of folks who don't want to politicize their job, and they don't want their business. They want to produce good products and services that they can be proud of. And you know what? When they go home and on weekends, they can do their politicking, left or right or middle, whatever they want. That's great. Don't bring that in the office, and don't leverage the company's money or brand to push either agenda, any agendas. So the issue that what we need to do is come alongside those people inside the companies that are trying to make the right decision. And frankly, if we see companies that are publicly saying, we're just serving our customers, we're providing good products and services, we need to do business with them. So instead of a boycott, it's a boycott. We want,
I like that.
Because I really believe in the market and the market influence. And I believe if companies that are neutral are really, really profitable, it's going to put major pressure on their competitors who have gotten politicized and have gotten into issues unrelated to the business. And so it's that, Adam Smith, the famous economist, talked about the invisible hand. That would be a massive hand.
Well, I want to ask you about this because someone who knows a whole lot about ESG in this told me once that boycotts don't work. But we've kind of seen the opposite of that. And I love your idea of a boycott because in my opinion, they do have an effect. And look at what we've just seen happen with Bud Light. I feel like is such a clear example of what happened when they went in a direction that really clashed with what their consumer, their buyer, felt like was a good fit, right? They had Dylan Mulvaney come in as a spokesperson for their product, and a lot of people said, we don't agree with what this person represents. We're going to stop buying your product. And it was widespread, and Budweiser was tremendously impacted by that. That was a traditional boycott. People just said, I don't like what you're doing. I'm not going to buy your product anymore. And I mean, it tanked them. Anheuser-Busch, I guess, is with the parent company there. So what is do you think that boycotts work, or when we look at the whole landscape of products, right, or things that we can consume as consumers, there are going to be there's so many options, right? And each company is going to believe something a little bit different or stay neutral. And so as a consumer, in my day-to-day decision making, and maybe I know what they stand for and maybe I don't, if I don't like a little something over here, or I want to take my business elsewhere, that's not really making too much of an impact, right? If I'm going to just personally boycott something, nobody's tremendously affected by that. But then we have seen it have huge ramifications. What is your take on that?
Well, boy, there's a lot there, Kyle.
I know. I'm asking you huge questions.
And you clearly understand this issue. Well, I mean, historically, the left has been really good at boycotts. The right has been bad. There are very few that the right has done. There was a Target boycott, I can't remember how many years ago.
Well, that was pretty recent, and then I feel like we kind of got over it because, listen, it was as a mom.
Well, actually,
I don't go to Target for other reasons too. But
I'm talking about a prior, and I'll talk about Target. Yes, there was a prior one that had a several-month effect, but it ended. This is a prior one. But the left, I'll make generalizations. Historically, the left is frankly willing to commit to be inconvenienced for their ideological, in their shopping. The right, and I'm using broad categorizations, generally aren't willing to be inconvenienced as much.
Well, Target shouldn't be so awesome.
No, exactly.
Okay, or convenient or helpful to us in our everyday life. But it's really their fault.
Yes, but there really, several things changed. And you alluded to Bud Light, and we'll talk about that. But when you had companies, all of a sudden corporations, that are saying we're not, and these are public companies,
Mm-hmm.
and it really exploded in many ways. We talked about ESG, that exploded, but in 2019, the Business Roundtable, imagine 200 most influential CEOs in America
Right.
got together and they redefined the purpose of a corporation. They said,
Wow.
it's not maximizing shareholder value, it is helping all stakeholders, and shareholders happen to be one of them.
Yeah.
And so if a company is not serving shareholders, they're serving anybody and everybody. So, but when that happened in 2019, in 2020, we saw people get canceled back to our database. You got debanked if you were on the wrong side of the Trump campaign.
Debanked,
wrong side,
meaning banks won't work with you because they don't like what you're about.
Exactly. They say you're too conservative, or your view of human sexuality is wrong.
Credit card processing companies.
You had web hosting companies, and if you were on the wrong side of the Trump campaign, or Black Lives Matter, or COVID, or abortion, employees lost their jobs. Companies and nonprofits lost their ability to operate. It certainly was harmed. So we had a lot of Americans say, "Wait a minute," and then you had Disney getting very aggressively pushing sexual agendas in their content, and that started building, and it was in their content, and people started saying, "I don't want to buy that anymore. It's not good for my kids and grandkids." Well, then, at the same time, you had companies pushing back and engaging on state-based issues. You may remember having to do, whether it be a pro-life law in Georgia, all sorts of companies said, "You know what, we're not going to do business in Georgia because they believe the women are in jeopardy." All of that, then all of a sudden, you had the Dylan Mulvaney situation. And I feel like from the right, and frankly, that was the center and the right, people said enough. And I think for several reasons. One, it's an easy product to switch. You know, I can go from, and what people did is they went from Bud Light to another beer.
Sure.
That's not so hard.
Yeah.
But it has been devastating. Bud Light was the #1 selling beer, and it's been devastated. They lost billions and billions of dollars. At the same time, not too long after, Target introduced products and pushing, this was during Pride Month, you know, tuckable swimsuits in children's sizes, pushing the trans agenda, and working with, you know, a Satan worshiping designer on some of these projects, literally. Target was really hurt, and they really have been. And then the third, I already mentioned Disney. Disney, their stock has cratered, and so those three companies, very distinct markets, right? And people are saying no. So I do think it's a new day, that the American people are saying, I'm not going to do it. But to your point, I only have a certain store near me, and I have to decide, am I going to drive another 20 minutes out, 20 minutes back? Because you know what? I'm worrying about paying the rent and taking care of my family. I don't have the time.
That's exactly it, Paul.
Yes.
We have so much going on. I talk about this all the time.
Yes.
You know, I'm a full-time working, full-time parent.
Yes.
So I speak to this a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
The expectation on us as everyday citizens to go outside of our extremely long to-do list. We're exhausted. We have a million things going on to think about. And be conscientious about where we're placing our dollars. We want to. I think the desire is there because we're all passionate about certain things. We care. We have, you know, our values, and we want to live those in every aspect of our life. But Target's right there, and it's big. And also, I think the other thing that we have to consider, and another really important factor, is that we have kind of short memories with some of these things.
Yes.
I didn't even remember that Target had an issue previously. And I think that as a culture, we're also apt to sort of forgive and move on when some of these corporations have blunders, right? Like we roll into like the BP, which is now called something else, or Exxon. And remember when they were the untouchable company because of the oil spills back, several decades ago. And we get over Amway, right? We get over things. We forget, or new generations come up and they don't realize what has happened. And that's a conversation that has fingers in a lot of what's going on culturally and globally right now too. But I think this is so interesting. And I love to focus on what we can do, what your average everyday person can do when they really want to do a better job of putting their money, where their values lie. And so is it realistic for somebody to show up to a shareholder meeting? Is it realistic to figure out how to apply your vote in the way that you want? I love going to, HR and trying to figure out where your retirement funds or where your pension, where that money is going. But what else would you say, and I really appreciate your take on this, you're so knowledgeable about it. How can we be doing better in this area?
I think we have to allow ourselves the ability to try and understand that we're not going to change everything. So, but find the areas where you can make a difference. We talked about your investments. Okay, do that. I do think it's okay. I didn't answer your question. If you decide one person, Kyle's going to shop here and not there, in a big company, that doesn't make a difference. But honestly, if you pick one and then you talk about it, you tell your friends, that could make a difference. I think to your point, to your question, it's being integrated, and where we're able to use our voice and our influence, whether it be our vote or our literal voice, and it could be going into the local store and say, I really like shopping here, but I don't really want to subsidize these agendas. And it may be speaking up in a very thoughtful, kind, very winsome way. I think that makes a difference. I think talking about why you're making decisions, purchasing decisions, and I don't mean you have to make the Thanksgiving dinner table. We've got to talk about this. But I do think at times we do need, if this is a moral issue, an issue we really care about, we do need to use our voice. And our voice is our money, it's our vote, and then it's our literal voice. And then it's with our feet. We're going to go to that store, or we're not going to. And I think if lots of folks did that, it would make over time a tremendous difference. I think the other thing that you are seeing, and we know people are using our database for this, is they're deciding where to work. Because if you're going to work 40 hours a week, and the profits are going into an agenda, a political agenda, that's really what we're talking about. It's just a political agenda. People need to think about that. And I think over time, if really talented people say, I'm going to work here and not there because of the political agenda, because you know what, I just want to work and sell good products. I'll do my politicking on the side. And if they do that and frankly tell the companies, then that will make a huge difference.
You're making a really important point here, because also culturally, we have gotten very quiet. We're hiding behind screens. We're keyboard warriors. We've put up sort of this very safe, comfy buffer between having conversations like that. And I think that we've forgotten how. Don't you think? Like, I recently made a phone call to a small business that I love patronizing, but they were doing something that was pretty bad. It was pretty egregious. And this wasn't comfortable for me, or it wasn't typical, but I just thought, I'm a human being. I want to give this small business, my money. I want to be able to take my kids there. And I picked up the phone and had it ended up being very challenging. And I later had a better conversation, but I was sort of reteaching myself how to do this.
It's true.
And I would love to see us all just kind of step out and be a little more courageous in kindness and in love, because ultimately you're trying to help them do better, right? You're providing feedback that helps them. It doesn't have to be nasty. It doesn't have to be hypercritical, and just say, look, hey, I really wish you weren't doing this. I want to bring my dollars there. I just wanted to let you know. And then they're free to do what they want with that. But I wish that we could start getting back to that kind of better one-to-one interpersonal communication and just sharing with each other, like, hey, don't love it. Please do better.
Exactly.
And then we'll support those efforts. So.
No, you're right. I mean, we like to say we want to help businesses get back to business so they can make a lot of money.
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to harm them.
Right.
In fact, I mean, all day long, I'm saying, I want you to make more money. I think in part what you're touching on is there are unfortunately both some political actors, but then corporations have used their influence to silence people and to scare them. Yeah. And so yes, technology, we text, we tweet, we're not, like you said, we're not good at engaging and conversing with people with whom we disagree.
Sure. Yeah.
In part, what has happened because of the politicization of companies, what is one of the things that a lot of your listeners and your viewers may be aware of is this whole concept of DEI,
right?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is in essence critical race theory. This agenda that is dividing people, and it's saying basically we have the oppressor and the oppressed, and it's dividing people on racial lines, mainly racial lines, but also socioeconomic lines, gender lines, all these things. That under the banner of ESG, remember environmental, social, and governance, as we talked about, one of the things that's pushed under that pillar that corporations are pushed to do, and they push it on their boards, and they push it on the executives, and the executives hire people for consultants and in staff for millions of dollars to do training, and all their employees are forced into this training that's very divisive. And instead of the two of us, we're colleagues, and I just see, well, Kyle, she's sharp. I helped her last week on a project. All of a sudden, Kyle's told, well, Paul's bad because he's a white male. And white males did bad things for the last couple hundred years. So all of a sudden, this wall that we should be, as Americans, working together to make our business successessful. Let's move ahead. And all of a sudden, you've injected a wall. So right there, to your point, you in the workplace, you're told, well, Paul's this, and you're that, and Fred's that, and Sally's that. And then people are walking on eggshells, and then if someone says something accidentally and someone's offended, all of a sudden, human resources is there, and people are getting fired and sanctioned for things that they shouldn't be. So instead of having this ability to occasionally at the water cooler have a conversation, oh, did you watch the debates last night? Sure. Right now, especially if your viewpoint is from the right, in a big public corporation, you probably have to be really careful voicing any conservative opinions in the workspace because they're people who've been trained in some ways you say brainwashed through the DEI agenda that somehow an opinion opposite theirs is a threat and harms them. So that's a long-winded answer to people are afraid to have conversations on issues they disagree.
It is the entire reason I started Politically Basic. I'm glad to hear you speak about it because that is my intention to a core is to solve this problem.
Yes.
It makes me emotionally devastated actually to understand that we have come to this place as a society. I love talking about politics. And yes, we disagree, but if you think about it, every single person is going to disagree because we're all different people.
Exactly.
Try to find one other person who believes precisely exactly what you do on every single issue politically, which is almost every single issue. I mean, every issue is a political issue.
Exactly.
It's not possible. And so we're setting ourselves up for failure here. If we expect that we are all going to perfectly agree and then giving ourselves license to have a screaming match and cancel and unfriend and not be family members with someone who is going to disagree. We're all going to disagree. It's just human nature. And when it's statistics, really.
Yes.
And so it makes me so sad that we have gotten to this place. And my heart is like, throw the doors wide open, have the conversations, be respectful. Go into it knowing you are going to disagree because otherwise it's just completely unrealistic to think otherwise. The fact that it has crept into our, our work environments, our schools, our homes, our churches.
Yes.
Like, this is a recipe for taking down a nation that is built on freedom and built on choice and personal authority. And so I just see it as one of the worst kind of like sicknesses that we are battling against right now. And again, appreciate what you're doing, because we've got to stop looking for the ways that we can tear each other down.
Yes.
We've got to reunify, respect each other, and appreciate our differences. Isn't that what we used to do? See someone who is different from us and be like, wow, great, variety is good. Diversity is a good thing.
Of course.
And it's now turned into kind of, this thing that is dividing us. So anyway, that's my tangent on what we're doing here and what the point of this is. And so all that to say, I very much appreciate your perspective and what you're trying to accomplish at 1792 Exchange. I think that it is the healthy, right thing for our nation, for corporations, and for, every single person, because it affects everyone here too. One thing I wanted to bring up is, we're hearing from our younger generations who I think are well-intentioned in this belief that, capitalism has some negative aspects to it, and socialism's sounding really good to them. And, it's kind of shocking. It is shocking to see the trend in the polls, in the data of how, younger millennials and Gen Z, which are essentially 42 and under, but Gen Z they're about 11 years old to 26 right now. They think socialism sounds really fair. It sounds good. It sounds, compassionate. And those are all things that Americans are, right? And we want to be. We want to be fair and compassionate and good. And what would you say to that? Having your expertise and your knowledge, and two, just kind of understanding how other markets work globally and other forms of government. And you've been boots on the ground, in our political system here, working for Kelly Loeffler and Mark Meadows. What would you say to anyone who's thinking, hey, you know what, we need to go in this direction. Socialism sounds like the way. We're not doing it right. Yeah, no, well,
ultimately it's a recipe for death of the nation. As we know it, if we go that route, because capitalism is not perfect, but it's the most efficient and produces the goods and services that people need to have safety, to have power. Electricity is critical, to have food, and to have jobs and opportunity. But I think to your specific question, why are younger generations so susceptible? One, they're really the frog. The water has been slowly, they've been in the water as it's been heating and heating. And really there are very few cultural institutions that are giving a traditional or capitalist message. So from the schools, from television, movies, our broader culture, and largely the news media is pushing an agenda. And the message that most of them get in most schools, frankly, government-run schools, and frankly some private schools and some faith-based schools, is really this focus on your feelings as opposed to facts.
Sure.
And so, and then it's, here's some information, memorize it, spit it out, not teaching people how to think critically. So if you have a whole generation that doesn't know how to think critically, and they're told it's all about how you feel, and which means also how other people feel. And to your point, the Americans are very compassionate, and that's good. That's a good thing. We should be. But it's very easy to believe a lie and really, in essence, adopt a faulty political and economic model, which is socialism. If you're thinking, well, those people over there don't have as much as these people over here, they must feel badly. It's not fair.
Right.
So let's just tax them a lot and give it to them. That makes me feel better. It makes them feel better. Certainly makes them feel badly. But long term, we all are harmed.
Yeah.
And so what we've got to figure out ways, how do we communicate the common principles, basic economic principles? I'm not an economist, but we need to figure out
Yeah.
educating them so that they understand this agenda is being pushed for political reasons. Frankly, people who don't want America to be the most wealthy superpower.
Yeah.
Yes, they frankly are intentionally wanting to pull America down to bring others up. We want to bring others up, not pull America down. Right?
Well, yeah, and I mean, this is such a huge conversation, but
yes.
But I appreciate you explaining it that way. 2 points I want to make. One is, America is very unique, and I think that's something that we are not communicating well to anybody, specifically our younger generations, is that other nations will not grow stronger and then support other nations in the world. America will.
Yes.
We are strong and we help others. We are sending billions of dollars in aid recently to nations who are at war and who are, trying to build their national defense. They're not going to turn around and do that for us. So bringing America down does not level the playing field in a sense where everyone's helping each other.
No.
And the other thing I want to ask you about quickly is something that I am seeing happening too with this understanding of, socialism sounds really good. Why aren't we doing that? Sounds good in theory, but in practice, I think the practice is what we need to focus on here.
Yes.
Look at how that plays out. We do bring down the people and the companies and businesses who are supporting, who are offering jobs, who are helping families put food on the table. And like, if we harm enough of those, or they leave, they flee, right, to other countries to do business.
Companies can do that.
Where does that leave us? It really does damage and bring all of us down. And so I think that it's an interesting conversation to have about how we help people understand. I think I hear a lot, maybe you hear this too, people's quick response to, you hear like some kid protesting somewhere and they're like, America's the worst, capitalism's horrifying, and we should be socialist. And people always love to say, go live in a socialist nation and see what you think. But to that point, they're not wrong. You go and you live in a country that has socialism and see how not free, not thriving, not healthy, not safe, just not treated as a human. You have humanitarian crises and human rights issues galore, and how devastating that life is. They don't get it, and they're not going to go do that. They're not running home to pack their bag.
No, you're exactly right. You use the right word, thrive. We want everyone to thrive.
Yeah,
and we've got to figure out how to explain to those people, and I don't have the answer, but to say that we need to have the freedom, and which means we need to reduce government regulations and the cost of doing business for businesses. That means it's not just regulations, it's taxes. So that then people can make the decisions they want. They can have the products they want, because ultimately, you hit the nail on the head. We're losing choice. And when you have government pressure, when you've got socialism, you're going to have fewer choices. That means your quality is going to go down. You're not going to have innovation. You think about what has made America great. Part of it, our innovation technologically,
100%.
Health. People don't even realize the impact of the ESG agenda. Let's just talk about food. Because of this pressure to get out of fossil fuels, why do we actually have a very small starvation problem in the world? It's still tragic, but it's far smaller than when I grew up. It was billions of people starving. Well, why? Because of you take natural gas and use that to make fertilizer. It's pretty, and pesticides and all that. Because of that, we have a surplus of food. Now, it's not getting everywhere it needs to be. There's still people hungry all over. But that's a perfect example. If we followed the ESG agenda, which frankly socialists are embracing, that means they're saying you have to eliminate fossil fuel-based fertilizer. Okay, well, what happens? Perfect example. A couple of years ago, Sri Lanka, nation in Africa, struggling, developing nation. They were doing okay though, not great, but okay. What did they do? Their leader wanted to get ahead and increase their ESG score globally. How did they do that? And this is a socialist concept. That's why I'm saying this. They said, we're not going to use fossil fuel-based fertilizer. Food production went down about 40%.
Wow.
Complete turmoil. the president, I can't remember, it was the president or prime minister, was literally chased out of the country.
Incredible. Yeah.
So you have a failed state
Right. Oh.
because of socialist principles finding its root in ultimately ESG and the practice. So what we need to do is help use these teaching moments to help people understand that small thing. And then and look at other countries, whether it be, I mean, we have little microcosms to look at, or big, whether it be China or Cuba. I mean, Venezuela is going that direction.
Right.
Why is there crime? Why is there poverty? Why is everybody leaving Venezuela? They're lovely people. But you know what? We don't want people just coming in willy-nilly. We need to have a process.
Sure.
The folks you were talking about who are sitting and protesting this and that and saying, I hate social, I love socialism, hate capitalism, it's because they're living, they're eating the fruit of the seeds that were planted by prior generations.
Absolutely.
And you fast forward in the next generation, if we do embrace socialism, there's not going to be much fruit. And that person is going to be really, really sad.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting to look at that person who believes that concept.
Yes.
And see them as only having the ability to be protesting it thanks to the benefits of what they are arguing against. So that's a much bigger conversation.
Yes.
But thank you for answering that. And I want to wrap up here with you. We could probably talk for days about all of this.
I'd love to.
It's so fascinating. I love digging in, and I'm getting a much better understanding of all of these concepts, and I really hope that our audience is too. You know, we're on Politically Basic, where we talk about the basics of all of these concepts and political issues, but I like to have a politically extra moment of every episode where somebody just maybe overreached or they were a little extra. And so the one that we're going to talk about today is a very timely politically extra moment, which is we have been seeing anti-Semitism absolutely exploding on college campuses. Columbia, NYU, a lot of it's happening in New York, where you have a larger Jewish population and faith there. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, was just in New York yesterday, actually speaking to Jewish students and the schools and calling on the president of Columbia to either get it under control or resign.
Yes.
Our higher educational institutions have been doing a little something over the last few years that, unbeknownst to the rest of us, was going on. Because this just feels like it came out of nowhere. It seems like it came out of nowhere, but there's no way that it just came out of nowhere.
No.
Simultaneously, President Biden is making a concerted effort to eliminate student debt and pay off everybody's student loans.
Yes.
And a lot of people are upset at that on its own because for a number of reasons they've had to work incredibly hard to put themselves through. So many people still have student loans, and it has kind of charted the course of their adult life in dealing with that. And now here comes a president who wants to just wipe the slate clean while this is going on with students at these universities who are being harassing and threatening and harmful to Jewish students, Jewish faculty, residents there. That, to me, is a really interesting convergence of issues, and certainly makes a good candidate for our politically extra moment. But just economically, what do you think about this sort of push to have student debt wiped out? And what do you think the effect of that will be? Do you think it's going to happen, first of all, because, you know, it's getting legal pushback?
You're absolutely right. You said this is a combination of two things we've talked about. It's the most cynical political pandering and payoff. I mean, unbelievable. The president already did it once, and it was rejected legally.
Right.
Rejected legally. So, but he was smart politically. He did it before the election, and it was rejected after the election. So he got him elected.
Right. We're trying again.
and frankly, that may happen again. Back to people who are not thinking critically. Right. And I can appreciate if someone has a big loan, a big debt, and someone's going to say, "I'll wave it away." That's a nice gift, kind of like winning the lottery. Problem is, other people are paying for it, and taxpayers are paying for it. There's no free lunch. So economically, it is the absolute worst thing we should be doing right now. schools, I mean, the cost of college has dramatically outpaced
Yes.
inflation, even our current terrible inflation rate.
Wow.
And why is that? In part because you have this subsidy of federal loans and everybody being told just take on this debt, and ultimately several things happening. Why does it need to be paid off? Well, you've got people graduating with degrees that are useless, but they really haven't been taught,
like
again,
that.
they haven't been taught to think critically.
Right.
And so I understand they're angry, but economically, the president is only creating this concept moral hazard. It's going to get bigger. There's going to be more of it. If you wave away this debt, that means the next generation is going to take on even more.
Absolutely.
And so you've got a political problem, to your point. You've got an economic problem. And to the fact that you have people here with anti-Semitic viewpoints, that our taxes are going to go to pay for them, that I think it's a bridge too far for most Americans. So I think, and I want to applaud you for pointing that out, that this is the kind of thing, like we talked about the Dylan Mulvaney thing with Bud Light. This could be a catalyzing moment,
right,
where the American people stand back and say, "Whoa, wait a minute! These people are supporting terrorists, and it's anti-Semitic. At the same time, the president's buying their vote."
Right.
And I think that could cause people to stop back and think, to your point, at a basic level, is this a recipe for either economic or national success? Because you hit the nail on the head. We are not going to thrive and succeed as a country if we are just torn apart culturally and then torn apart economically.
Right.
And so that's why I'm thankful to be here, but thankful for your show to help people think critically about these issues.
Well, thank you. I am so interested in your particular opinion. Your experience has been varied in such a wonderful way that you can speak to so many of these political and economic and social issues as they are coming all together. They're swirling right now, and and people are struggling, trying to figure out how to move forward in the best way. So I am hopeful. I hope you are hopeful also that there are ways that we can individually make choices that align with our own values, but that are also good for our fellow American and for our country too.
Absolutely.
So I'm so glad you were on this show today, Paul. I definitely want to have you back. I hope you'll come back, because there were issues and topics that we didn't even get to crack into that I really want to talk to you more about. But thank you for being here today, and thank you all for joining us here on Politically Basic. This has just been a really fascinating conversation. I hope you learned as much as I did. I am going to keep digging in on this topic, and I hope that you'll go to the 1792 Exchange website, 1792.com. It is .com, right?
1792 Exchange.
Exchange.com. 1792exchange.com. And then, of course, the year is in numbers for that website. Take a look at their resources, and really, I think it's so helpful to understand how we can move forward in our financial world with more personal authority with that. So big thanks to Paul Fitzpatrick for joining me. Make sure you guys are following me at Politically Basic and at Being Kyle Campbell on all the socials for daily updates, for episode drops, and all kinds of politically basic moments that are hopefully helping you guys break down what's going on in our political world. That is my goal always, to deliver you the basics so that you get to decide. All right, we'll see you next time.